Hello, everyone, and depending on which time zone you might be in right now, a good day or evening to all of you. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join day one of the Philippine IT BPM Industry's flagship event, the International Innovation Summit 2020. Before we start, I would also like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to our sponsors and government partners for the huge support they have provided to the Philippine IT BPM industry and for the kind assistance extended to enable us to successfully mount this summit. For several days throughout this month, more than leading the conversations, we will be laying down the groundwork to secure the future of our sector and reinforce its role as a major economic driver of the country. We know that the last couple of years have been quite eventful, with a number of global and local developments that introduced some challenges and opportunities to the industry. Still, the IT-BPM sector was able to sustain its growth momentum by the end of 2019, with recorded revenues amounting to $26.3 billion, or a 7.1% jump from the previous year. Meanwhile, the number of full-time employees in the country registered a 5.8% growth compared to 2018. This brought our total headcount to 1.3 million Filipinos. These numbers, as you can see, placed our growth in the higher end of the recalibrated figures we presented last year. But as we entered 2020, we were confronted with a new set of obstacles that affected not just the Philippines, but the rest of the world as well. The rapid spread of the coronavirus disease pushed governments to implement strict lockdowns that curtailed economic activity and severely impacted unemployment, which unfortunately had immediate and devastating effects on global economies and consequently future growth projections. According to the International Monetary Fund, the world's GDP growth in 2019 was at 2.8%, and that it was anticipated to reach 3.3% in 2020. With the pandemic continuing to fuel uncertainties, global economic growth is now expected to have a deficit of 4.4% by the end of this year. Even some of the world's largest economies are forecasted to experience a contraction in light of the current landscape. The US, Japan, Germany, India, and the UK are just some of the examples. Interestingly, China and Vietnam are some of the few notable exceptions as they anticipate to be in the black insofar as GDP growth is concerned. For the Philippines, the current projection places our deficit at 8.3% ending 2020. Zooming in on how industries have fared globally, there's a fair amount of insights that one can also gather. Based on the study by the Boston Consulting Group, the healthier sectors are non-discretionary and essential services that were less hit, like semiconductors, retailing, or e-commerce, and household products. And then some examples of pressured industries are utilities, food, and beverage, and capital goods. Those that were hit the hardest, or the vulnerable sectors, include hospitality and tourism, energy, banks, and real estate. Now that we've seen how the outbreak has affected global markets and industries, let's take a closer look at how it has impacted the country. Based on data gathered by the National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA, the economy fell into recession with GDP contracting by 0.7% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2020 and by 16.5% in the second quarter of 2020. This brought the first half decline to 9%, triggering the first recession in the Philippines since 1998 when the Asian financial crisis happened. A separate report by the Central Bank of the Philippines shows how the past 7 months has taken its toll on the Philippine economy. Remittances are expected to drop between 2 to 5%, driven by the repatriation of OFWs, lower deployment rate, and lockdown restrictions in key OFW countries. As of October, unfortunately, close to 224,000 former OFWs have returned to the Philippines. Tourism is set to record a 65% decline in revenues, which is just one-third of its 2019 numbers. Travel receipts from foreign tourist arrivals to the Philippines is expected to decline by 77% as well. Unemployment more than tripled from 5.1% in April 2019 to 17.7% in April 2020, when lockdowns were widespread and at their most strict. This translates to 7.3 million Filipinos who lost their jobs, and the situation seems to have improved a bit as the unemployment rate has since eased to 10% based on the latest available report. An enterprise study by the Asian Development Bank and the Department of Finance also shows that the lockdown since March 16 caused two-thirds of businesses to temporarily close and another 29% to reduce their operations. As everyone knows, there has been a substantial effort to open up the economy in the recent months, and we do look forward to seeing improved economic indicators when NEDA releases their Q3 report on the country's GDP in a week's time. So despite the less than ideal circumstances and the different obstacles that we had to hurdle, the industry continues to demonstrate its resilience, tenacity, and enduring role as a major economic driver. If you would recall, very soon after the lockdown was announced in mid-March, the sector was declared an essential industry. And it was during this period that we garnered substantial support from our government partners. And to name them, we have PEZA, DTI and BOI, DICT, DOLE, NEDA, and of course, the Interagency Task Force. So thanks to them, we were given special concessions to mobilize an on-site skeleton workforce and enable work-from-home operations at scale. And over the course of the community quarantine, the sector was also able to increase its productive capacity while maintaining strict work and health protocols to ensure the safety and welfare of the employees. This expectedly took a huge toll as the industry had to take on extraordinary and planned costs. During the past 7 to 8 months, the industry has spent a sizable sum on accommodations, again, primarily during the early days of the quarantine, continuing provisions of shuttle services, and other work-from-home enablement and execution expenses, as well as missed opportunities arising from lost revenue due to reduced capacity. The good news is that we were able to increase our productive capacity from just 50% in March to 73% in May, and as restrictions started to ease in June, this figure gradually went up to 90%. I'm pleased to share that with the continuing government support, the grit and determination shown by industry and company leadership, and the unparalleled resilience of the industry itself, we are now operating in excess of 95% productive capacity through a blended service delivery model. Our ability to render essential services to both domestic and international clients is indeed a welcome sign of the sector's recovery. This is further reinforced by insights from the government and our allied industries. According to PEZA, the IT BPM sector recorded 14.1 billion in investment pledges from January to September 2020, a 43% jump from the 9.9 billion recorded for the same period in 2019. Many organizations continue to identify our sector to be a prime driver of real estate, and data gathered by Litio Property Consultants shows that the IT BPM industry accounts for 7.2 million square meters or 48% of occupied space in the country. And although 240,000 square meters of office space was vacated between March and September 2020, which is largely a result of contraction in other industries, this was offset by 297,000 square meters in new contracts, which were mainly driven by the BPO sector. According to the same report by LPC, 49% of the live office space requirements for the second half of 2020 comes from the IT BPM industry. Santos Knight Frank, Colliers, KMC, and CBRE share similar sentiments, with CBRE projecting that 63% of transactions in the second half of 2020 is expected to come from our sector. Now, although not business as usual just yet, the IT BPM industry has been one of the few sectors that was able to remain operational throughout the community quarantine, providing livelihood for millions of Filipinos and their families amid the challenges of the health crisis. Opportunities within the industry actually continue to come in. Just based on recent conversations we've had with different country leadership and from what we've seen published in various news articles, there are over 30,000 job openings across the different subsectors. And since we're basing this off on what is only available as public information, plus select conversations with some country heads, we believe this number to be actually higher. This is reflected in a report by JobStreet, which shows that for the past 6 months, that is from March to September 2020, the IT BPM sector has been the top hiring industry. Equipped with the point of views of the government and other business sectors, we sought to reach out as well to industry players to get their thoughts and general perspective on what the next 3 years will be like for the Philippine IT BPM sector. Now, most of the country leadership that we reach out to believe that the industry will not be growing at the earlier projected growth rates, again, between 3.5% to 7.5% in revenue, due to the impact of the pandemic and the global contraction in demand. Despite this, they acknowledge that although the overall market declined, the labor requirements of IT BPM industries or companies here in the Philippines remained stable. To get a clearer view of the next 2 years, we have likewise initiated a recalibration and imperative study with a global research and consulting firm. The findings from this research will be unveiled on the 5th day of the International Innovation Summit and will serve as a vital input to our sector's playbook on how to optimize the country's capabilities in IT BPM services, accelerate recovery, and facilitate further expansions. From these conversations, we also gathered that growth in the sector will be heavily influenced by the following: a higher focus on technology, again, accelerated adoption of automation and digital transformation, an uptick in demand from key geographies, investment in higher value services, customer experience beyond traditional contact center as an example, cloud, and cybersecurity as well. A robust ecosystem comprising of telecoms, other infrastructures, and enhanced regulations. Obviously, the need for a strong, very strong government support is needed, and an improved and predictable business landscape. As we continuously strengthen our response to the pandemic, I assure you that we have not lost sight of the industry's key priorities. In fact, IBPAP has embarked on several programs and initiatives in conjunction with everything else. Allow me to quickly recap and highlight a few of those milestones. Digital Cities 2025, which was launched a few months ago in June 2020, aims to drive inclusive growth in the countryside by selecting high potential areas throughout the country and transforming them into bustling IT-BPM hubs in the next 5 years. Through the collaborative efforts between IBPAP and DICT, we identified 25 new locations to add on to our expanding portfolio of thriving business districts that support the IT-BPM ecosystem, create jobs, spur the development of other industries, de-risk Metro Manila concentration, and boost the local economy. As part of the Digital Cities 2025 program, they will receive support of DICT, other government executive agencies, local government units, industry leaders, and academic institutions. In an effort to ensure that the Philippine IT BPM industry and its workforce are ready to answer the growing and shifting demands of the global marketplace, IBPAP has been focusing on an upskilling and reskilling framework that, when fully funded, is aimed at skills development for 1 million Filipinos over a period of 5 years. Please note that there is an increased urgency for us to accelerate all efforts to fast-track these skill-building initiatives. And this is one very important area where the industry, its stakeholders, and the government will need to jointly work together at speed and at scale. The National Talent Upskilling and Reskilling Program framework focuses on 3 learning tracks. For the Domain Skills Learning Track, IBPAP has partnered with the ICT and DAP in upskilling Filipino employees on top priority skills identified by the various IT BPM subsectors. We also have an initiative in the pipeline for Digital Skills Learning Track that aims to establish partnerships with institutions and other enablers to provide for upskilling programs for digital skills that cut across different subsectors again of the IT BPM industry. Under the Leadership Skills Learning Track, IBPAP is partnering with leadership development institutions and resource parties in conducting leadership building sessions. We also have 2 ongoing initiatives this year under talent attraction, namely the ITBPM Career Awareness Fair and the Returning Overseas Filipino Job Opportunities Program. The ITBPM Career Awareness Fair, which was launched in September, is a series of virtual events that provides ITBPM experts with a venue to educate potential talent on the various career opportunities available in the sector. The ROF Job Opportunities Program, on the other hand, is a joint initiative with DOLE and OWA, which was launched just this October to help connect Filipinos displaced by COVID-19 with employment opportunities in the industry. Currently, there are 21 companies participating in the program that is looking to fill up in excess of 20,000 job openings. We also had extensive discussions with different government and legislative partners to ensure that our point of view as an industry on several bills, laws, and issuances were heard and considered by the implementing agencies. A very critical issuance that we were able to secure during this period is the expanded work-from-home mobilization and enablement exemption, which was key to our increasing productive capacity. And working with PEZA, this was most recently extended up until the latter part of next year, 2021. In addition, our close coordination with the Interagency Task Force throughout the past 7 months has also led to various concessions that help the industry to further optimize and increase productive capacity of its operations. This also paved the way for increasing clarity in the implementation of work and health protocols across sectors, as well as with other allied industries. Now, for the CREATE Act, we have partnered with several business groups to ensure that our collective position as job generators and economic drivers is properly communicated through various platforms and interactions. There's a strong likelihood that this will be closed out within the month of November, and we are hopeful that the final version would have heeded much of our pleading. We have also expressed our support for the passage of the Philippine Digital Workforce Competitiveness Act, which aligns with several of IBPAP's current programs, such as the Digital Cities 2025 initiative and the National Upskilling and Reskilling Program. An act establishing ICT hubs nationwide, which encourages the formation of ICT hubs across the Philippines, is another piece of legislation that we are getting behind with. We are also working with the DICT in making the Philippines more cyber resilient by supporting the provisions outlined under a department circular. On the other hand, we have also been dealing with a number of proposed legislations that might prove counterproductive to what we want to accomplish, which is opportunities for more Filipinos and a revitalized Philippine economy. As I share these latest developments about the industry, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge our people and their incredible show of strength amid these uncertain times. Just like our healthcare professionals, the IT BPM workforce has tirelessly battled at the front lines of this pandemic, supporting not just the operations of their own companies, but also that of other essential services at a global scale. Without their extraordinary resilience and determination, we would probably be in a very different position right now. So, we take a pause to thank you and to salute you, the IT BPM workforce. The impact of the health crisis has indeed placed the sector in uncharted territory, one that we had been able to navigate relatively well so far, but much remains to be done to pivot and work towards unleashing the future IT BPM potentials of the Philippines. With that, I would like to encourage everyone here to actively participate in the following session discussions and contribute to securing the future of the Philippine IT BPM sector. Once again, thank you and have a great morning or evening ahead.